On today's episode of the Saturday Air Raid, we're talking wide receivers. We're talking our top five 2024 draft eligible receivers for the upcoming draft. We talk about our favorite landing spots for them, our player comparisons. We have some really good conversation about these generational talents. We'll see what happens. I'm glad that you're here, glad that you're with us, and I thank you for joining us today.
Caleb Williams to the 10, to the 5, touchdown! Judkins, here he goes, breaking tackles, and look at the leg drive right to the end.
Stroud throwing, this time it's for Marvin Harrison Jr., and it's a trifecta of touchdowns for Harrison.
Welcome into the Saturday Air Raid. We have got the band back together. This is the show of shows produced by the NFL Lab Network. I'm your host, Johnny Roberts, and with me tonight is Brad Bolt and Dan O'Connell the Beard. Welcome in, guys. It's great to get the band back together.
Been a long time coming, having us all back together.
That's it. And what the bloody hell have I missed? Green Bay is apparently a playoff team. Carolina is,
Turd.
Okay, so this is my favorite show of the year, I would say. It's where we discuss the wide receivers for the upcoming NFL draft. And I went back and I watched and I listened to our show that we did back in June on the wide receivers and the outlook for the college season. And we had a lot of really good takes. The reason I bring it up is because I said, Brad, that I thought that the Chicago Bears might end up with Caleb Williams some way. And here we are, 8 months later. Here it is.
Well, since you're at it, the Powerball this week's for $200 million. Have you got the winning numbers? Have you got a couple of them that you can pass over to us? And we'll. But it's one of these shows that looking, and we'll obviously dive into it, but after the first couple of receivers, this could draft, and all three of us could end up having completely different back half of the top 10s. And that's what makes part of this NFL draft stuff so fun and exciting for us, I think.
Yeah, that, like you said, that back half of the top 10 is ridiculous how many names can flip in and out of there.
I was going to say that, so we were talking about it before the show, and I was like, okay, let's do wide receivers. Here we are. This class is so deep that we are probably going to do this over definitely 2 episodes. I would say even 3. I'm thinking of doing like a part 3 for like deep sleepers. We've got time to kill before the NFL draft at the end of April, so I think it'll be okay. This episode, it might be fairly chalky. I'm guessing that we'll probably all have something similar. And then the other thing I was going to say was, in going back and listening to last year's episode, we did damn well. I want to say, like, our top 5, our top 10 receivers that we discussed, even the ones we threw in towards the end, we're going to be talking about most of them.
Yeah, you guys were obviously a lot more on it than I was at the start because I hadn't started looking at the upcoming receivers and everything. But listening back to some of it and now looking at the names that we're looking at and some of the guys we were talking about, one of them, the only reason we're not going to be discussing him on this show is because he didn't declare for the draft. So it was like guys that we were expecting to maybe come out, and some of them may have had down years or whatever, but these guys are all still within that top 10 consideration that we were talking about.
And as always happens, every year there's other receivers that step up that sort of almost come from nowhere. And they come into the top 10 and they obviously bump some of the other ones that we would have picked down and a lot of other people would have bumped down as well.
That's exactly it. Like some of the players that we're talking about. So you're talking about Brad Emeka, who we can't even talk about because he's gone back to college. And then the ones who've just jumped in who we didn't even, like we had mentioned, like there's going to be receivers that we're, from as the year goes on that will improve and some that will fall a little bit. Not too many fell a little bit, I got to say. But man, they're so interesting to talk about all of them in their own right. And it's just the way I'm interested. I'm fascinated at how the way people have got them tiered as well. We'll get into that because I'd be interested to know where you're putting players and where you're benchmarking them against other ones. right before we do, top of the show, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to this. That really, really helps us out. And you can follow us on Twitter as well. I'm at John Lloyd Roberts, Brad's at BradBolt1, and Dan's at Beard_82. Anything else before we kick off?
Just one other thing that I thought is at that preseason show, John, you brought to the table the guy that I've also co-adopted with you in Malachi Corley. But as we're recording this is after day one of the Senior Bowl, and his stock really rose from speaking with people who were there and reading a lot of the comments. He's really jumped out at this. So even these guys who might not necessarily have been in our top 10, but people that we were, or that you guys, were throwing names out to look at through the season, some of these guys have already started to impress. So this is where, the Senior Bowl and the Combine types of things are where you can see some of these guys go from they weren't in anyone's consideration and now they're right up, because I wouldn't have thought that, I don't know if you would have thought this, but prior to the season, I don't know where you would have had Malachi Corley in the draft, but, just recently Dane Brugler released his first 2-round mock draft, and he had him going in the second round to the Houston Texans. So that's just sort of shown what some of these guys are able to do, and that's what can make the wide receivers show so fun, because there could be a guy like a Dontavian Wicks who last year went in the 5th round and he's now maybe the Packers' second best receiver.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And, even today, Daniel Jeremiah has Malachi Corley in his top 50 players in the entire draft. So, I have been excited to talk about him, to hype him up and to bump him up to that stock level. And now I realize that it's actually coming to fruition. And, if you're doing any fantasy drafts, it's there's no value to be had anymore. So, no, that's a great shout. And I also saw, just quickly before we start, Nate was also saying, I think that Xavier Legette had a bit of a tough sort of like day one. So Malachi Corley stock up, Xavier Legette apparently stock down. So could have just been a bad day, might have had a bad night's sleep. So can't hold that against him too much there.
Yeah, and it seems like too a bit of the day one, you see this quite often at the Senior Bowl. Day one, having new quarterbacks throw to the receivers, the day one can look pretty bad, but I'll be interested to see what it is by time day 3 rolls around, or the game rolls around, to see how that chemistry improves. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on as we move forward.
All right, let's kick it off. Number 1 at the top, any qualms? Marvin Harrison Jr. What say you?
I agree. I had him number 1 as well. Dan, how about you? Are we 3 for 3 with Marvin Harrison
What a
Jr.?
shock. You're kidding. There's no way we all have him at number 1.
Who saw that coming? No, I think so. Out of Ohio State, it is Marvin Harrison Jr. He had an interesting year, I got to say. Did anyone feel like he underperformed or performed less than expected, given the fact that his quarterback this year just gone was Kyle McCord? Obviously, a bit of a step down from CJ Stroud and even Justin Fields. Was he with Justin Fields? No, he wouldn't have been.
No, not with Justin Fields, I don't think. No. I mean, I guess
I think the expectations were so high for him, though.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Such high expectations. CJ Stroud then comes into the NFL and has, Rookie of the Year, nearly, he's Pro Bowl, all that sort of stuff. So you can understand why there's a little bit of a step down from one to the other there, I think.
Yep. No, I think he still had a really good year. So 1,211 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 26 rushing yards with a rushing touchdown as well. 67 receptions. So I think he still did all the things that we expected. We talked about him before the season. He was our number 1 wide receiver going into the college year, and he still came out that way as well. Had some amazing games, even against, the teams like Michigan, in which they lost. 5 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. He had, 6, 7, 8. I think I'm counting 8 games here with over 100 yards. And only 2 games where he didn't catch a touchdown as well. And ruling out that first game against Indiana, which apparently was a tough matchup for them at the start of the season.
It's not a bad down year though, is it? 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, not bad for a down year. So,
No, that's exactly right.
I have a question. Do either of you have any real concerns about Marvin Harrison Jr. Coming into the NFL? Like, is there, because you see sometimes you don't really want to say that there's prospects with zero concerns or zero issues whatsoever, because it's very rare. But is there? It seems like in a way that Marvin Harrison Jr. has very little concerns. Do either of you have anything you're slightly concerned about, or you reckon he's just going to be almost perfect from the get-go?
I'll let you take it away, Dan.
Physical cornerbacks will give him trouble. Yeah, I think physical cornerbacks will give him some trouble, especially off the line. If they can get hands on him and sort of jam him at the line, I think that's the biggest concern with him, but they're not going to be able to do it that often.
No, for me, he's easily the number one wide receiver. I kind of comped him to, for me, he's somewhere, I think his closest comp is probably DeAndre Hopkins, just because he's so long. He's got such huge hands. He's tall. He's very, very explosive. He's a very good route runner. So he's sort of got that CeeDee Lamb in him as well. My one concern with him, though, when I watch some of his film, is it's sort of like he catches the ball, and as soon as he's touched by a defender, he kind of goes down at the point of first contact. There's not too much yards after the catch with Marvin Harrison Jr., I personally find. But having said that, like, your priority one as a receiver is to catch the ball, and then your priority two is to then move the ball once you've caught it. So I'm okay with that, and I think that's something he can work on. He'll probably work on that as well once he sort of like, grows a bit and feels out his body. I mean, he's listed right now 6'3", 205. So he's still got a ways to go. But I think as far as picks go, I think any team will be happy. I think he's as safe as they come for teams to draft. And, like if the Bears took him at 1, obviously that'd be really surprising because they've got a lot of needs to fill. But if the Patriots took him, wouldn't be surprised. That's actually where I think he goes. I think the New England Patriots will draft him at 3. And if not, he's not going to get past the Arizona Cardinals. So unless the team trades up for him, I think he's in a really, really good spot. And he's, like I was saying, as safe as they come. A couple of things he can work on, but I think he can, like I say, work on those.
Dan, did you have... I'm not trying to take over here, John. I'm just curious. You gave your player comp. Dan, did you have a player comp for Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Didn't. I haven't comped any of them to players, other NFL players yet.
That's all right. I was thinking somewhere along the lines of Larry Fitzgerald.
Yep.
Or a skinny version of AJ Green.
Yeah, AJ Green is the other one I've been hearing, and I like that comp. My only thing with Larry Fitzgerald is he was very good at yards after the catch, which is what I'm not really seeing in Marvin Harrison. He's also like a lot bigger, but I'm also thinking of late Larry Fitzgerald.
I don't think Larry Fitzgerald is a close comp.
I don't know. Maybe it was just like...
I can see the AJ Green one, the Larry Fitzgerald one.
Yeah, and it's probably not a good one, but I was thinking just like in terms of physical look as opposed to, like, I don't know, just the way he would catch the ball and, run a little bit. It just sort of, when I first saw it, I was like, it just looked visually a bit like Larry Fitzgerald as opposed to play style.
I mean, I'm watching now, like just that cut, the change of direction ability is definitely there. And that's definitely in Larry Fitzgerald, the ability to get the ball, turn your body around, look at the field ahead of you and just be like, yep, I'm off that way. Exactly. That's where I'm going. So yeah, super explosive, great size, length, arm span, and hand size. It's all there. It's all there. I think he's as safe as they come.
Would not be a surprise if he went number 1. Like if someone sent Chicago a Godfather offer to go from, if New England decided they really wanted Marvin Harrison or Arizona did, and they went from 4 to 1, like it wouldn't shock me to see him go number 1 just based off of his skill set alone.
Having said that, where do you think he goes?
I reckon you're right. I think 4 to Arizona.
Yeah.
I think New England takes Jaden Daniels at 3.
Yeah, I think the top 3 need quarterbacks too much.
I hope so with New England, because I just feel like that's where quarterbacks go to die. Even though it's a brand new day in New England, I understand that. It's just I've still got that bad taste in my mouth that's never washed away. So we will see. All right, let's jump to our number 2 guy then. So we talked about him. I mean, my number 2, I'm assuming he's both of your number 2s. He wasn't our number 2 this time last year, but I will say we did talk about him enough to the point where we thought he could creep up and ascend to that next level. One thing that changed for me, so we're talking about, of course, LSU's Malik Nabers. He's listed at 6'1", 190 pounds. I think he's actually a bit bigger than what they got him listed here. I think he's growing throughout the season. We're to the point where he's up to like sort of 195, 200 as well. He certainly looks a big body as well. So his quarterback was Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman Trophy. And he had a phenomenal season, 89 receptions, 1,569 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns as well. And to go with it, a few rushing yards as well, but not too many. He had an average depth of target this season of 17.6. I think I saw on PFF as well, he had something like 35 explosive plays. And explosive plays are plays of 15 yards or more. So to get 35 of those is insane. That's nearly... I want to say 89 receptions. That's nearly half his receptions. So he was insane. He became more of a big body sort of physical receiver, almost kind of like what we're used to seeing from LSU over the years from either Odell Beckham or Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, the kind of receivers we've grown to become accustomed to. But he really took a step forward. And I got to say, I'm seeing a bit of chatter at the moment that some people feel like he even might be the wide receiver 1. Definitely starting to see a lot of people who have tiered him in the same tier as Marvin Harrison Jr. and saying that he's about as safe as they come. And I got to say, I think I might be there as well. So given my number 2 this time last year was Rome Odunze. I think it's been a sensational year for Malik Nabers. Brad, how have you seen his season go so far this year?
Well, it's interesting that tier sort of that we're talking about. So my top 3 receivers, I have them in the tiers of, it's going to sound weird, but they're only half tiers between them. So I've got Marvin Harrison Jr., then it's like a half tier drop for me to Malik Nabers, then a half tier drop to Rome Odunze, who I have as my number 3, spoiler alert. But he's right there, like they're right on that cusp of each other. Like I just like he's quite versatile, like in his alignment, in his usage. You can play him outside, you can play him in the slot, you could actually have him swing from out of the backfield. Big playability, you got to love. Just, and his explosiveness to get out. I'm a big fan of his route running. Like it's really precise. I think we mentioned this it was either in the draft show or in the preseason. My big thing is I like guys who, when they're supposed to run 8-yard outs, they run 8-yard outs and they don't take it to 9 or 10 because it throws off timing of the offense. Just, I can understand why people would have him in that same tier or potentially over Marvin Harrison Jr. because when you look at their stats from this year, Malik Nabers obviously had the better year than Marvin Harrison Jr. So I just think he's going to be... it's going to be one of those drafts where you remember back to the CD Lamb, Justin Jefferson draft where you look at Jerry Jeudy, but obviously some of those guys haven't panned out, but you look at that and you just look back and you go, that was just a really good receiver class when you look at the guys who were there. So I have no issues if people have him above Marvin Harrison Jr. Like I said, it's only a slight teardrop for me from one to the next. But yeah, I'm a big fan. I like what he's shown this year, and he's going to make a team very happy, whoever drafts him.
He absolutely killed it. Like he had the best season of all the wide receivers.
Yeah.
So he is an absolute stud. I've got him in the same tier as Marvin Harrison Jr., but just below him.
Yeah, it's basically what Brad said.
It's honestly, they are so close, and I 100% understand why people have him right there with him as well. Like any other year, he's a clear-cut wide receiver 1.
Yeah,
without question. So he's got the speed, he's got the acceleration off the mark as well. His hands are unbelievable. He can do it all. Like we said earlier, we said 6 feet, 200 pounds. And he's going to get better as well once he gets in the NFL. Like, he'll hit the ground running in the NFL. So any team that drafts, I don't think he's getting past the Giants at 6. But could you imagine the Chargers going after him at 5?
So I was just going to say, let's imagine a world, and this is more fantasy talking than anything now, but let's imagine a world where New England does take Marvin Harrison at 3, and the Chargers take Malik Nabers at 5. Like, I think I'm taking Nabers as my number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah. I would take Nabers number 1 if that was the scenario that played out. I think if Marvin Harrison gets to Arizona and they go back to back at 4 and 5, I'm probably going Marvin Harrison. But this is talking about their similarities. The one main concern that I have with Nabers is similar to Marvin Harrison Jr., his just being able to beat press man coverage. Like, consistently.
Really?
Like,
he does a good job of that.
I think he does a good job, but I think he needs, like, not every time, if that makes sense. Like, if he's just a bit more consistent with it, is what I think his issue would be. Like, I think he can do it a little bit, but then there's every once in a while you're like, you've just seen that for the last 4 snaps. Why haven't you been able to do it since that first one? Like, it's just, I just think maybe needing to set it up a little bit better so that he's just a bit more consistent with it. But that was like, I mean, that's not really much of a concern. Same with Marvin Harrison. You can work on that, and if you can do that, then all of a sudden, it's all pro type wide receiver from the get-go.
Yeah. I think it'll be tough at the Giants because of the quarterback situation, but I think he comes into the league and puts up 1,000 yards as a rookie, even if he does end up on the Giants.
Just even the leap, I had some concerns about his 2022 season, which wasn't bad. And in fact, now in hindsight, it seems like most of it was actually on Jaden Daniels, who also took like a monumental leap forward to the point where he won the Heisman Trophy. He had an insane season. So good on him. I mean, I didn't even have Jaden Daniels ranked in my top 10 quarterbacks going into the season last year. And then he came out my number 3 quarterback. So like, that just goes to show what kind of leap he took. Same thing with Malik Nabers, though. So they had a really, really tough matchup, LSU did, against Florida State week 1 of the college season. He had 6 catches for 67 yards, no touchdowns, and they lost that game. They had a small school after that, and then there was that huge game against Mississippi State where he went 13 catches, 239 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And he kind of never looked back. Almost every single game after that was at least 100 yards or more. Against Auburn, he had 89 yards, but still a touchdown. And then the last game, a bit of a dud. But like, outside of that, for the majority of the season, like, he was just lighting the league on fire. It was exciting to see. I've seen a couple of comps as well. So he's been comped to DJ Moore, which I like that comp. He's kind of like a bit of he's not listed this way, but he kind of seems like a big-bodied receiver. He's very good with physicality. He's a great route runner. And he's got a huge explosive burst.
Yeah, my other comp too, which I mentioned, is a bit more of an older guy, was Torrey Smith.
Yeah,
Torrey Smith was that type of guy too. Super explosive. As much as I would love it to see somehow he gets to the Carolina Panthers, it's not going to happen.
There. Dan, that Brad's just trying to will into existence that somehow he's going to end up on the Carolina Panthers.
There's got to be
some. Realize it's a 2024 draft, not 2023, and you've got no picks straight away, right?
Yeah, no, I know, but that's the only way that it's going to happen. And if anyone has it, if you can find a Malik Nabers with a Laramie Tunsil gas mask bong photo, if you can throw that out into the ether, so he drops to 33, that would be fantastic. But I don't.
Brad's going to be sitting here in his little studio, working on his Photoshop skills. Trying to stitch up Malik Nabers big time.
Yep, AI a photo of Malik Nabers with a gas mask bong.
Good stuff. No, so we're happy with Malik Nabers at number 2. He's very much in that tier, though, around Marvin Harrison. And then let's get to 3 now in Rome Odunze. who last year we had him at 3, or at least I think I did. I think we all did, actually. We went Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka, and then Rome Odunze. And obviously, Emeka Ibuka had a really down season, but again, quarterback issue, so he's gone back. Kind of makes sense. It's such a stacked class. I think Emeka Ibuka could actually do quite well in next year's receiver class now that he's made that business decision. But Rome Odunze, so he had a even more fantastic season than last. So 2022, he has 75 catches, 1,145 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He backs that up this season just gone on Washington for 92 receptions, 1,640 yards, 13 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown to go with that as well. Washington have a fantastic season. Michael Penix has a fantastic season. They go all the way to the national championship game. Have a bit of a tough one in that stretch, though. But all in all, I think everyone got to see the greatness that was Rome Odunze. And I've seen some of the big names in the industry who have got him as their number 2. We were talking earlier today. I think Daniel Jeremiah released his top 50 players, and I'm pretty sure Rome was his number 2 receiver after Marvin Harrison, who was his number 1 player overall. So any which way you slice it, he's in good company, all 3 of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely love Rome Odunze. He doesn't have the best long speed, but it's still really good. And then his physicality at his size, defensive backs in the NFL are going to have such a tough time matching up on him.
Yeah.
He's going to be able to overpower majority of them, and he can go up and catch it at the highest point.
Yeah.
So he's one of the best contested catch wide receivers in this draft. Because he doesn't get elite separation, he's in those situations a lot more than some other wide receivers, but he excels at that. So that's not a concern for me really at all. So I just think everything about him, I love the size, the overall game of his. I think he's going to be massive in the NFL.
Yeah, I sort of similar thing. I love how he can high point the ball. I like his run after the catch ability. He's got fantastic body control, precise route running, like all the stuff. If I were an NFL GM, like all the stuff that I look for, like they're the type of things that I like. So you could understand why someone like a Daniel Jeremiah, who was a scout for the Baltimore Ravens back in the day, like why he could put someone like Rome number 2. Like that's where I was saying these guys to me are so close within that they're almost within half a tier of each other, sort of thing. And it's hard to put these type of expectations on him, but he did remind me, and his player comp was Devontae Adams for me.
Okay. I think he's got the perfect player comp for him. For me is Keenan Allen, and that's the one I hear the most. And every time I watch him play, I just see that it's like not that elite speed, but he's so physical. His hands are so good. He's such a great route runner that it doesn't even matter. He looks like he's faster than he is because he's just so strong. He can take on defenders. He can take it to the house if he wants. He can take a screen to the house. He's just so versatile in so many different ways. Just doesn't have that beard, but he does make it up for in his beautiful hair.
Because what was Keenan Allen's 40 time?
It was like a 4.67 or something like that.
Yeah.
So 4.71.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
4.71. Jesus.
Yeah, I remember it being bad.
It was,
See, I sort of think the reason why I sort of gave him a bit of Devontae. So Devontae Adams' 40 time was 4.56.
Yeah, okay.
And I think Rome's sort of going to be in that. I feel like that maybe Rome's going to be in that sort of range, like around that 4.5, 4.6 mark, as opposed to the 4.7. And I just think the way he, like his body control and his high point catching and route running and everything. I mean, either comp for me works. Like if you could say Keenan Allen, you could say Devontae Adams. I like either of them. I think they both work. But I just feel like because he's going to have that touch more speed than what a Keenan Allen is, that's why I sort of landed on a Devontae Adams.
That's an interesting comp because I don't think his
Yeah,
route running's anywhere near Devontae Adams' ability at route running.
Yeah.
But see, I would have thought that Keenan Allen was better route runner than what Devontae Adams is. So
I don't know. I think Devontae's one of the best in the league.
Yeah.
But when you
So is Allen developed into one as well. So
yeah.
So that's
we're comparing him to 10-year vets here. So
yeah, exactly.
That's why I don't like comping them to NFL players, but like.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know. And we should probably give these guys like maybe a low end comp as well, just to reel it back in a little bit.
Name brand, off brand.
Yeah, name brand, off brand.
So
the other problem with those three guys though is I don't have any like my B grade kind of C grade comps for them are still like really, really elite players. Like I think my C grade for Marvin Harrison was like Jalen Waddles. It's like, oh no, that's for Brian Thomas, who we'll talk about next. But yeah, like just insane talent.
To me, here you go. The three aspects of Rome Odunze. Here's his three comps: low, middle, and top. Low comp, Mike Evans. Middle comp, Keenan Allen. Top comp, Devontae Adams. There you go. Nice and simple for everyone. Just three of the best wide receivers in the league.
We've just set him up to be the biggest bust in NFL history. Right? Sorry, Rome.
It feels that way, but just the last thing I want to say about these guys is like these players, they're going to be top 10 draft picks.
Yeah.
Think about last year, like Jackson Smith and Jigba was a highly, highly touted draft prospect, and he went 20. And even in years past, the Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave draft, those guys went 9, 10, 11. I think Drake London was somewhere in there at like 8. These guys are going like, we're saying like potentially 1, probably 3, probably 4, 5. Like they're going to be in that range. And that's just insane that the way this draft will potentially start quarterback, wide receiver. And then we'll start to get to the other positions. Like, and that's, assuming that another team doesn't just come up and take another quarterback.
So this is just a curious, in the top 10, where do you think the first 3 receivers go? So you think Marvin Harrison to New England, John?
I do think that New England's going to draft him because I just think he's like Jaden Daniels, as amazing of a season as he had, and I understand he's a quarterback. I just think Marvin Harrison is complete, like fail proof, like he's completely bust proof. Whereas Jaden Daniels could have some, and we talked about this on our quarterback show last week. Like, he like Bryce Young has done damage to these smaller quarterbacks. And I wonder if that sort of is in the back of people's minds. Whereas you got the third pick, you've got Marvin Harrison for the next 10, 15 years. You don't even have to think about it.
See, in my mind, I've got Marvin Harrison going at 4 to Arizona, Malik Nabers going 5 to the Chargers, and then Rome would go number 6.
Yeah, I've got Nabers 5 to the Chargers. Rome,
Chargers offense is going to be insane.
Yeah. So,
but then had Rome going 9 to the Bears.
That was going to be my next thought process. Was either that. Yeah.
But can you imagine Caleb Williams to Rome? That's going to be sick.
And then having DJ Moore as well. Like you're going to have that would probably, to me, that's the best way to, because this draft coming up, and we might get into these guys obviously in future shows and things like that, but this draft has a lot of good offensive linemen. So
yes,
you could take a guy like, if you were Chicago, you could take a guy like a Joe Alt or a Olufashanu. But if you really want to do the opposite of what Carolina did and set your rookie quarterback, if that's the direction they go, set him up with talent. You've got DJ Moore there. Why not go for a Rome, a Dunze to round out your wide receiving core? You set at receiver then. You've got Caleb Williams has got his options. So that would have been my probably next spot is I reckon either 4, 5, 6 they go, or Chicago gets Rome, or they trade up with someone to try and take him.
Be smart by them. I hope they don't do it, obviously, but I want to be able to support Rome in the NFL. So,
yeah. I just think, like, if you're in New England, don't you just think it makes more sense to draft Marvin Harrison 3, and then you've got the third pick in the second round where you could probably take, like, Michael Penix or maybe Bo Nix if he's there, or one of these other guys.
Or trade a third-round pick for Justin Fields.
Right, exactly. You've got that option as well. Like, I just think that is a much better sort of plan overall than, I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right, let's jump into our fourth receiver now. We'll see if it's going to be any different. I don't think it will be, but we'll see. So I've got out of LSU again. It's the second receiver. It's Brian Thomas Jr., listed at 6'5", 200 pounds. And did you guys have it any different?
No, I had Brian Thomas.
Yeah, so what I want to say about him, so 2023 just gone, so he really took a step forward as far as his production goes. And I think that after these three receivers that we talked about, now we're getting to the stages where you can actually sort of point to things and be like, look, he's a great player, but he has this sort of thing that I'm a little bit worried about. 68 receptions for 1,177 yards and 17 touchdowns. That was a huge step forward from his 2022 season, where he started the same amount of games and he had 31 catches for 360 yards and 5 touchdowns. But he did take that huge step forward. And I think what really jumped off the page for Brian Thomas Jr. was just the way he was linking up. I mean, they were it was almost reminiscent of that, like, I'm not saying that they're Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, but it was like Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas. They were both doing sort of similar things. It was like they were attacking all over the field from both options. And I think he had an awesome season. I think he's like tall. He's a strong player. He's a very good catch. He's got good hands. He's got good eyes. His ball tracking, I think, is really one of his strengths. And once he gets the ball, he can just burst off to the scene, which I also really loved about him as well. So, and then just good hands in the red zone. Like, he's one of those red zone targets. Again, like 17 touchdowns off of 68 catches is an insane amount. Also, average depth of target, 17.3 yards. So, thoughts on Brian Thomas and why you've got him at 4 and what you really like about him more than others? And then why is he not in that upper tier where a lot of people I feel like are starting to put him up next to Rome?
So pretty much everything you said that what you like about him is what I had as well. And like you said, it's an insane stat when you think about it. What'd you say? 68 catches, 17 touchdowns. So 25% of his catches were touchdowns this year, which is just insanity to think. I can see why someone maybe put him up in that upper tier with the top 3, just based off of, like you said, the explosiveness and the catch radius and the like you said, one of the underrated things was tracking the ball, like those deep shots and everything. But I can also see why some teams might be a little bit wary that he did have such a huge jump. Like, was that just a byproduct? Some teams might question, was that just a byproduct of that offense, or was that just because he was held back in that first year, or the previous year and whatever? Because what you say, it went from 300 yards to 1,100,
and then and the receivers that he had alongside him was obviously Malik Nabers as well, but it was like Keyshawn Butte was another one of them. It's like, why aren't you more productive than this guy?
Yeah, so I can see why some teams might have concerns. I like him, but I don't have him in that same tier as the other guys. I just think the other guys just have less holes to their game. And I'm not saying that Brian Thomas has huge holes either, but I just feel like the other guys are more complete in what they've done. And this feels like they've shown it for longer, or shown that flashiness longer.
Yeah, I think he needs to work on his route running a lot more still.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. It's his separation is my
obviously, he's the elite burner in this class. Like, his deep threat is insane. At his size, to be able to have that deep threat with that speed, that's why I've got him up so high.
Like that DK Metcalf about him. He's not as big, but he's like on his way to that kind of size and speed. Yeah.
Yeah. So if he works on his route running and then his contested catch as well, he'll be unstoppable. Like, they're gonna have such a hard time matching up on him, because it's hard to press him at the line because of that speed and that acceleration off the mark. So you're not going to be able to try and jam him at the line. So if he gets that route running in that short area sort of fine-tuned, then, he's going to be impossible to stop almost.
He either needs to improve his route running or go to an offense where they say, right, what are your 3 routes that you run really well? We want a 9. We want a 9 ball. We want a post, and we want a slant. And
how are you going to rely on Russell Wilson's career?
Oh, that's a discussion for another show where
perhaps
he's
in New England, you never know. No, but that was a good point, is what I want to say. So my qualm against him, other than the production jump, was just that sort of separation. And maybe I've got too many like scars from like Hakeem Butler and N'Keal Harry inside of me. But like the thing,
Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, well, the thing that makes him great. So I'm looking at like some of these huge games that he had against Kansas, 5 catches, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. Against Florida, 6 catches, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. But then he had those games against like Auburn, 2 catches, 7 yards. Against Alabama, he had 3 catches, 36 yards. It's like he just sort of like vaporized. He was gone against these sort of like bigger schools. And I know that Auburn's not a bigger school, but in the same conference, in the same division, they play each other really competitively. And it's like, it's concerning that he couldn't sort of stick with it, or he was game scripted out, or whatever you want to say in that regard. But like I was saying, just to finish with the big body and the separation thing, is like DK Metcalf, if you're going to be that big, if you're going to play that big, you don't really need to have too much separation in you to win the ball every time.
Do you have a player comp that you like, John, for him? Because I've seen a couple thrown around, and I haven't settled on one really for Brian Thomas.
I'm trying to think. I said one before. Who was that?
The 2 that I've seen floated around a fair bit, and like I said, I'm not really sold on it, and maybe I just need to watch him a little bit more, but was Martavis Bryant, and the other one was Robbie Anderson, were the 2 that I've seen floated around by people. But like I said, I'm not sold on them, but they're the 2 most common ones that I've seen. I think
people forget how good Martavis Bryant actually could have been.
Yeah, I just sort of always saw Martavis as more of a deep threat guy, as opposed to, I think Brian Thomas can take the ball and then take it to the house. So I think he's got that yards after the catch ability, which I know Martavis had as well. And
maybe that's where I saw people comparing him a bit to Robbie Chosen or Robbie Anderson now. Robbie Anderson before Robbie Chosen now.
Yeah, I just think he's better at the yards after contact as well. And that's why I kind of like this DK Metcalf comp, even though he's much smaller, everyone is. He just sort of in any situation can win the ball without being
except
like Johnny
former coach Pete Carroll. Except his former coach Pete Carroll's the only one who's bigger than DK Metcalf.
Exactly.
No, but Brian Thomas, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. Do you guys have any comps, or do you have any predictions of where do you think he goes? Where do you is he a first round pick? Oh, I mean, he's a first round pick. Whereabouts?
I think he goes in the first. I think there's so many talented cornerbacks in this draft, and then the offensive linemen as well. And then you talk about the defensive linemen and edge rushers as well. I think he starts to fall back down into that sort of 20, 25 pick range.
Yeah.
Don't think he's going to find himself in the high teens.
Brad, do you have the list of draft teams there? Yeah. The order?
So we go Chicago, Washington, New England, Arizona, Chargers, Giants. Then we go Tennessee, Atlanta, Chicago, the Jets at 10. So I'm not saying the Jets, but the Jets could also be an option.
If the Jets don't take an offensive lineman at 10,
yeah, it should be. It should be. But then after that, you go Minnesota at 11. I don't think Minnesota, because they've just got Addison with Jefferson. Denver, I could see based off of Cortland Sutton might be on his way out. Jerry Jeudy hasn't really shown.
Does he strike you as a Sean Payton guy?
Probably.
Potentially. Michael Thomas type?
Potentially. Vegas at 13 to pair with Devontae Adams. Potentially.
It's a good one. He'll be moving on soon, I imagine.
Yeah. New Orleans at 14. This one's actually the one that I really do think it's going to be. Is number 15. It's the Indianapolis Colts.
Yes, because Pittman's in a contract year, isn't that right? Yeah,
he's a free agent, but
they franchise tag Michael Pittman.
But even so, you can have. But their other receiver the other 2 receivers they've relied on were Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. So I think Brian Thomas is an upgrade over both of them and could fill out the other side opposite Pittman. But after that, you go Seattle at 16, Jacksonville 17, Cincinnati at 18. Cincinnati could be another spot if T. Higgins does leave.
Man. Jacksonville could be a spot.
Because Calvin Ridley could be on his way out.
They just paid $1 million wide receivers last year, didn't they?
Then you go. So then after that, 19 is the Rams, the Steelers, the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Houston Texans. Houston Texans at 23, the Dallas Cowboys. Then it's the Packers 25, so no. 26 Tampa Bay, which potentially depends on if Mike Evans stays or not. Arizona again at 27, Buffalo 28, Detroit 29, Baltimore 30, and then Kansas City or San Francisco. But I do feel like he goes well before picks 31 or 32.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%,
Yeah. I think a few people. I think the next guy we talk about is going to be that as well. And I'll see if we have any qualms here. So at number 5, we'll finish at 5 for today's show as we approach an hour. I think we'll be able to cut this down though. So I had Troy Franklin, who we talked about last year. And I think he was in our top 5 from memory last year as well. At 2022 season, he had 61 receptions for 891 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. And man, he took that next season. He took that jump that we wanted to see from him. He went to 81 catches for 1,383 yards and 14 touchdowns. And in a very explosive conference of very, very good teams in the Pac-12, RAP, he had a really, really good season. He was really good for Oregon as well. So he's listed at 6'2", 170, so a little bit on the smaller side, but he is tall. And man, can he take a ball to the house? Any disagreements with Troy Franklin at 5?
No, I've got Franklin at 5.
I've got him at 6.
Oh, okay. All right. 6. So Dan, that means, and you were very high on him this time last year when we were doing the shows. I think you were the one touting him the most.
I had him 6 preseason.
Oh, really?
Well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could easily see him at 5, and I could easily see him at 5 before the season as well.
Yeah.
I just think the frame of him,
I
think, gives me concerns enough where I just drop him down a touch.
Okay.
Because I had him at 6'3", 187, and I had enough concerns. Like, he's super skinny, like lanky and skinny.
Yeah.
And that gives me concerns against a lot of the defensive backs in the NFL. So if you're at 6'2", 170, that's scarier.
See, I'm starting to push back on that idea now that that this size, I think you can still be tall and you can fill out and you can still go from there. And I mean, like Troy Franklin is fast. He's like an explosive athlete as well. And so I'm not like Tank Dell, Devonta Smith with Troy Franklin. I'm more like, I think he's a bit bigger than those guys.
See, it's funny. My comp was actually Devonta Smith. Like,
really?
So that's why, that's why I probably don't have as many size concerns, because like you said, everyone was freaking out coming into that 2021 draft with Devonta Smith, Heisman Trophy winner. And everyone was like, he's not going to be able to succeed because he's so skinny. And now you've seen him. And on a lot of other teams, Devonta Smith would be a number 1 wide receiver.
I think he's a much better route runner, though, than Franklin.
Yeah, I think he is too.
Yeah.
I think Franklin is a really good route runner. But, yeah, Devonta's probably more polished and better aspect. But that was sort of my thought. Like that elite, like he has elite speed. Like he potentially could be maybe the fastest wide receiver in college.
Yeah.
So
absolutely blow the top off.
Yeah. So that's where it's sort of
teams.
Yeah, that's where like I think he's very much a first round wide receiver, and maybe even around that similar sort of mark where we were just going through the teams before for a Brian Thomas. I feel like he might be around that same sort of area, maybe a pick or two behind him. So, yeah, the size isn't really as much of a concern for me. It's more so, I guess, if you are using him correctly. Like if you're not trying to use him as like a massive contested catch guy, then yeah, I think he'll fail if that's your thought process behind it.
The offensive scheme for Troy Franklin's going to be massive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of these other guys at the top here, I think they can still thrive in a lot of different ones. So I just think just the play strength for me with Franklin.
I think like, yeah, I see a lot of like Josh Downs in him though. And by that, and like Josh Downs is small. I think he's smaller than Troy Franklin, but like, you know, how Josh Downs just plays so much bigger than he is. Like Jaden Reed, another perfect example of like these players who are small, but you would have to look at his measurements to know that it's small because they play so much bigger than they are. And the one thing I think about Troy Franklin is I think that if you're looking for these kind of like speed receivers who are great with their hands, Troy Franklin is the bet you want to make, as opposed to someone like who we'll talk about in the next episodes, like Xavier Worthy, for example, for me, who I'm not very high on, and he'll be a sleeper for me, but he's not really a sleeper because like other people are really high on him. But I just think, why would you risk Xavier Worthy, who will probably, you know, he could turn into someone like a Jalen Hyatt type, who's just kind of like fast but no production, when you can get Troy Franklin, who is kind of like everything that you want in a fast, shifty receiver. Yeah, he's a little bit skinnier. I can see what you mean by he's got that kind of like Devonta Smith in him, and he's probably not as good as Devonta Smith, obviously, but I just think he's got like that. He's explosive enough, and he's a really good route runner. He's kind of got that sort of like good route running ability for me.
So what was Troy Franklin's measurables you had there, John? It was,
I think these are going to be out of date.
Everything I've seen's been 6'3", 187.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking on Pro Sports Reference, so these are like his measurements going into this last year, I think. So
I think it was at the combine, Devonta Smith, or it's when he was actually on the Philadelphia website. Devonta's listed at 6 foot, 170 pounds.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe for me, maybe not quite as similar. Like I thought it was actually a lot like closer. They're measurables, those two. But that's where, that's why I sort of got it, because I think it's very similar body types. But as you said, maybe not quite as good as Devonta Smith.
Yeah, I still got Franklin as a back-end first-round pick.
Yeah.
I think he's up in the 20s, so...
A lot of Carolina Panthers fans are hoping he falls to 33, which I feel like is probably not going to be the case.
Hey, Brad, I don't think you're going to get these wide receivers.
No, catch you on next episode.
No, hey, a lot of these, there's some really good receivers in here, so there should be a chance they have the possibility. And look at me, there's a chance they should have a possibility that one gets to 33. But
there'll be a wide receiver there.
Yeah, there'll be a wide receiver there.
There'll be a quality one as well, because we'll talk about it in the next episode. There's some really good wide receivers still.
Yeah. Okay, real quick. I've got some comps here. Just give me like a yes or no. Do you agree or disagree? What about like a Chris Olave? No. Jordan Addison?
Could be similar.
See, I'm trying to find players who are not from last year, because last year was such a small class, like Jaden Reed.
Yeah, that's the difference this year, isn't it? Like last year we said about how small they all were.
Yeah, Tank Dell.
They're all giants.
They were all tiny little guys.
What about
Darnell Mooney?
Darnell Mooney is not a bad.
You know the one? Will Fuller.
Really? Will Fuller. I think Will Fuller
similar
was a bit
size,
bigger, though.
same speed, deep threats, can do a little bit more over the middle as well.
Oh my God, last year was time. DJ Chark. Yeah, interesting. Okay, KJ Osborne. So there's like you kind of get the idea of what we're getting here. I think he's sort of like the reason. So he's not in the same tier as Brian Thomas for me. He'd probably be in this sort of like tier. I want to say tier 3 or 4, but I do have him ahead of the next guys that we'll talk about in the next episode. Sort of guys like I've got like Adonai Mitchell, who again much bigger player, and we've talked about Malachi Corley as well, and some other guys that we'll get to in next episodes. But I still think he's in a good spot. He had a good season with the Bo Nix. He was highly productive. He was good at taking the top of the defense. My only thing was he was like either taking like screens to like the house, or he was blowing the top off defenses. He wasn't really doing anything in the middle or sort of like at after like the 7-10 yard line, unless it was like 20 yards downfield.
Well, I'm curious now. Dan had Troy Franklin at 6. Who did he have at 5?
So
Who's
I think,
5?
To be real, he's probably 5B. I've flipped these two a lot.
I've got an idea, but I'm curious if it's who I think it is.
Oh, yeah, go say.
It's not Keon Coleman, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, I like this one.
I think he's getting hammered this year because of the season that he had.
Yeah.
Like the expectations out of Florida State, for me, I had him competing for the national championship.
Yeah.
But they just had such an inconsistent season this year, even when Jordan Travis was healthy. And then obviously he got injured towards the middle part, towards the end of the year as well. So I think it's really tough to judge Keon Coleman on this year. But you look at him, he's 6'4", 215 pounds. They use him as a return man as well.
Yeah.
So he's got the agility to be able to get in and out of his cuts. He can play, overhead, he can play extremely well. He's got good size, good strength. He's a sort of prototype outside wide receiver that you're looking for because he can compete on the boundary. He goes up and gets it. He's going to overpower a lot of defensive backs in this league. And he can play inside, outside. He can do a lot of those sort of things. I just think if he can get his route running a lot more crisp at his size, he's going to be really hard to match up on. And he's so young still. He's only 20 years old still. I think he just turns 21 when the draft comes around or just after the draft. So a lot of they're so young, so big, these wide receivers, but I just think the size and the ability that he has, a team's going to look at him and think this is who we want as our outside wide receiver.
Yeah.
Which is why I've got him just over Troy Franklin.
I saw an interesting player comp for Keon Coleman, and if he hits his potential, any team that picks him would be absolutely stoked. But the Ringers, Danny Kelly has him, I think he has him well above Troy Franklin, and he has him as shades of Demarius Thomas.
Ooh.
That's his players comp that he does on his draft guide. He's got him as a shades of Demarius Thomas.
That's interesting because
if you were told that you're getting Demarius Thomas with maybe, a pick in the late 20s sort of thing, mid-20s, somewhere around there, you'd take that every day of the week, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, if that's what his comp is, that's nice. I like that because I really like Demarius Thomas. So I go back and watch Demarius Thomas a lot more to see it. But
that was just, I was just having a look because I was trying to see, because Keon Coleman's a guy who I've sort of had a little bit of a look at, but not enough that I'm comfortable in throwing out a comp. But that was the first one that I saw, and I'm a big fan of Danny Kelly's work, and Demarius Thomas popped up, and that sort of perked my ears up a little bit to go, oh, that's a really interesting one. If he turns out like that, that's
interesting. Gee, I like that. But yeah, like I said, I've flipped between these two a lot because I love Troy Franklin. But I just think the size of Keon Coleman and the physicality and the ability for him to just dominate, well, I think he'll be able to dominate on the outside. I've got him at 5. I love him. And I said like in the preseason with our wide receiver podcast that he was someone I was going to watch, like looking forward to watching this year to keep an eye on. And again, it was easy to be let down by him this year because of the overall offense of Florida State.
Yeah. That's kind of what I wanted to allude to, was like the previous 5 receivers we've just talked about, they all took huge step forwards in their production, in their efficiency, in their ability. Like Marvin Harrison, despite the quarterback being Kyle McCord, and, Malik Nabers took a huge step forward with Jaden Daniels despite having Brian Thomas, and Brian Thomas did despite having Malik Nabers. And whereas Keon Coleman, he kind of just basically had exactly the same season again. There was one game that he was in, but he didn't really play from what I can see. So And then he just kind of really, like, I felt like there was a lot of games where he just didn't have the hands. Like, his catches would fall short. He had, like, I think most of his production from the season came in 3 games, from what I can see. He had a huge game against Syracuse, 9 catches, 140 yards and touchdown. Week 1, Louisiana State, 9 catches, 122 yards. And then Clemson, 5 catches, 86 yards. And then after that, the next is like 54, 53, 24, 48. Like, and not saying that's everything. And let's factor in, like, his quarterback was Jordan Travis. And, you know, like, a lot of the other quarterbacks we've talked about are going to be first-round picks for the receivers.
And it was Jordan Travis and then whoever, I forget who even took over once Travis, he broke his leg. Was it broken leg?
Yeah, he broke his leg, but wasn't it in, like, the last game
Was it
of
towards
the
the
season?
end?
It was the last game against Florida of the regular season.
Oh,
So,
I thought it was earlier
like,
than that.
yeah, it didn't even really matter. And the other thing is, it's not like Keon Coleman had, like, that stout competition at receiver that he was playing alongside as well. Like, you know, we kind of talked a little bit about Johnny Wilson. He had the second most catches on the team with 41 catches, 617 yards. He kind of took a step back. Jaheim Bell was the next with 39. So, like, Keon Coleman was, like, the receiver. And that's just why, like, I've still got him he's in my top 10, spoiler, but I've got him closer to, like, the Tez Walker, Xavier Legette type of, like, he's a really just good, like, a good player. Like, he can make the catches he needs to make. But, like, as far as being that, like, special sort of playmaking ability that with the 5 guys that we've just talked about is where I'm sort of like, yeah, I think he's just more of, like, another just sort of, like, good all-round receiver, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of it comes back to the offensive system as well there. Like, you had Jordan Travis running the quarterback options, and then you had Trey Benson, who I won't say where he is for my running backs because we haven't done that show yet. But so you've got Trey Benson, you've got Jordan Travis. So that whole offense was based around that running game almost. Yeah. So it's hard for, obviously, Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson to have the stats of the other ones.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think forget what he put up this year kind of thing as far as stats go.
Yeah,
like
you have to just
– and you go back to last year as well and you look at his tape at Michigan State and I think he's got a really good chance to hit as a pretty dominant sort of wide receiver 2 at absolute worst on a team. But he'll be a wide receiver 1 for them.
That's a good note to leave it on. And I like that it builds suspense for the next episode that we're going to talk about these next group of guys. So that's 1 through till 5. We've talked about number 1, Marvin Harrison Jr., number 2, Malik Nabers, number 3, Rome Odunze, number 4, Brian Thomas Jr., and number 5, depending on which side of the fence you want to fall to, Troy Franklin, or even Keon Coleman, who we'll talk even more about and continue this on the next show, where we're going to be talking about receivers 6 through till 10. And you probably heard about most of them on today's episode anyway, as little spoilers. And then we'll do sort of like a deep sleeper class before the NFL draft kicks off. But I think that's been a great evaluation. How do you feel about those top 4? We'll say top 4.
I think the fact we agreed on the top 4, I think it just shows where the level of those 4 are.
Yeah. And to me, you could, as we'll talk about in the upcoming show, but you could raffle off pretty much really next 5 through to 10 in any order. And I would believe any of it pretty much. So that's what's making this draft class so fun.
Yeah.
It's been excellent. Okay, if you're still watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to this. It really helps us out. And follow us on Twitter. I'm at John Lloyd Roberts. Brad's at BradBolt1. And Dan is at Beard_82. And, of course, we have NFL Lab Network as well. And I said that I was going to do these shows once every 2 weeks. It sort of hasn't really happened that way. I think it's going to be more like once a week with the sheer amount of shows that we have. I'm going to be talking to Nate Polvote about who's at the Senior Bowl, about what he saw, what he liked as well. That's an episode that's going to be coming soon as well. And then we'll be back with more receivers. We're going to be talking running backs. Then we've got the combines coming up. And then we're going to have a few more guests on the show, which I'm really excited for, all the way up until the NFL draft. Going to be a lot of content. I'm going to be making a few reels as well about all the players that we're talking about as well. So there's heaps going on. Brad's show will be back as well. This week or next week, you'll hear us as well talk about, we didn't even touch on conference championship. Super Bowl's coming up. I can't believe it's the off season. It doesn't actually feel like it at all. Isn't this nice?
It's beautiful, yes.
Yeah, until then, enjoy your week. Enjoy football ahead. We'll catch you soon. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.